Welcome back for another helping of oysters, clams, and cockles. I am your host, Ross Bolen, here with Mr. Barrett Dudley to celebrate the end of 2022 with a little best of action. Barrett, do you have your New Year's resolution lined up yet?
My New Year's resolution is the same every single year. Which basically makes it more of a bit than a New Year's resolution.
Okay.
But it's not like a funny bit. It's just like a bit. It's like a sad bit almost, and that's to read. It's to read more.
It's funny to me.
I'm sitting here essentially doing the podcast, which I blame not the podcast specifically, but the reason for the podcast existing,
right,
which is what I blame for my lack of reading, which is that I'm sitting here with, I watched 50 shows this year. Like, when the fuck am I supposed to read?
I don't know, man.
Like, there's no time to read. And I know that some people do find time for both, but like, it's just, every year. So every year, the January rolls around and I'm like, this year, I'm going to read more, man. I'm going to read more. And then I read like one book and that's that.
You want me to make you feel better real quickly?
Yeah.
I read one book this year, Into the Woods, and it is a book I have been attempting to finish reading for like 7 years.
Into the Woods?
Yeah.
Who's the author?
It's an Irish murder mystery.
Okay, all right. It's also a very famous Stephen Sondheim Broadway musical.
Yeah. In the Woods, excuse me.
Woods.
I don't even know the name.
Into the Woods. Yeah, yeah.
In the Woods by Tana French.
Now, you do have Into Thin Air, which I think is sitting over here on your shelf.
And I read that in middle school.
John Krakauer, yeah.
So, classic. Yeah. Classic Everest book. But so I'm really bad about this too, and I also blame our shared love for television and movies.
Yeah.
But I think, and it's gotten even worse to where like now when I watch something with subtitles, I'm like, this counts. I'm reading.
Well, that's what Laura always says. She's like, because she doesn't get through a lot of books in a year either, but she's like, but we are readers. We read a lot of columns online. We read a lot of articles. We read a lot of reviews or recaps or like pop culture. Like we're still reading stuff. We're just not reading books necessarily.
Right. It makes it worse that we have really close friends that are incredibly good at this. They like stay reading books all of the time.
Right. Yeah.
Makes me feel shame.
Yeah. But hey, guess what? They haven't watched as much TV as we have.
That's right. They've missed a lot of the shows we're going to discuss today. I waved bye-bye to the New Year's resolution of read more after trying several times in a row.
Yeah.
So mine, ironically, is to watch more movies.
Oh, okay.
Because as I was making our best of lists for this year, best shows I watched in 2022, best movies I watched this year as well, I realized, like we discussed recently, I think I watched like 5 movies this year, and that was it.
Yeah, I've got my list of movies that on my list here that I watched this year. I don't think I missed anything. I jot them down the same way that I do the TV shows, and it looks like I watched 9 movies this year.
That's still almost double me. I did a terrible job with movies this year, but on that note, let's begin with our favorite TV shows we watched in 2022, and I was just going to go ahead with number 10.
Yeah,
and we can count down from there.
Let's do it.
My number 10 is The Gilded Age, Season 1, which I think people are going to be shocked that this even made my list.
Well, mostly I'm shocked that, the one fun thing about this is as we've really, this year especially, we've really narrowed in on discussing fewer shows and going in depth on them. So I had no idea you even watched The Gilded Age.
Yeah, I watched it.
There's probably going to be a few of those on this list.
Yeah, this one's on HBO Max. It's about a period of immense economic change and great conflict between the old ways and brand new systems where huge fortunes were made and lost. It's centers in New York City in 1882. So it's just, it's made by the same people who did Downton Abbey. Same guy.
Yeah.
This is just his next thing.
Okay.
It's the exact same in many ways, but just in a totally different time period, in a totally different place. And if you enjoyed Downton Abbey, you'll probably enjoy The Gilded Age Season 1. It was good fun, but it's admittedly, it's an adult show. Like if you're like 18 and you're listening and you go try to watch The Gilded Age, you're going to be like, fuck you, Ross. And that's okay.
Did you watch Downton Abbey?
Yeah, not all of it,
okay,
but almost all of it.
That we started it one time, and I was quite enjoying it, and then we got distracted by something else and haven't returned to it. But
that's what happened to me.
It's on it's moved on to my long list of shows that I will get to eventually. I just have no idea if that will be this year or like in the next 7 years.
Right.
but
It's worth it though.
Yeah,
For real, it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My number 10 is The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which had its
Was it season
which had its fourth season.
Wow.
Towards the beginning of this year, and potentially its best since the first.
Okay.
Amy Sherman Palladino, the creator and kind of leader of the writers' room, just like continues to knock this show out at an incredibly high level. Rachel Brosnahan as Midge Maisel is like one of my favorite performances of the last decade. Simultaneously, really funny with a with good dramatic balance as well. And I just love the period nature of it too. Like it's like the period piece part of it, which is like 1950s and 60s New York, which is really, really fun to see. And they do it incredibly well. And I think that on a lot of these lists, we tend to, I'm kind of bucking the trend. You'll see here that I kind of end up bucking the trend a little bit, but scattered throughout, we latch onto newness, especially in TV. And so sometimes like shows that are still operating at that super high level, but are into their fourth and fifth season, it's kind of easy to overlook them.
For sure.
This year, more than any, maybe I actually have mostly returning shows. I think there's only 3 that are not returning shows for me. Well, no, sort of. It's about split. But
I have 2 returning shows.
Okay, see? Yeah.
I went way over the top with the newness.
But just an awesome show that like will probably go down as one of my, when it's all said and done, its fifth season is its last season, probably going to be one of my favorite shows ever. Marvelous
Mrs. Maisel is a show that I heard a lot about after the first season, right? And it crushed at the Emmys. And I remember watching, I believe, the first 2 episodes and really, really enjoying it. And then life happened and it just got knocked off course. And It's one of those ones that it's on my long list to eventually get to and enjoy. I'm glad that you're saying it got kind of back on track, because it was sort of like you heard a ton in season 1 and then not a lot since then.
Yeah,
I feel like.
I think its third season especially was maybe not quite as well reviewed. I still really enjoyed it, but like it just wasn't, kind of hitting at the same level.
Yeah.
And I thought it returned to that really, really high tier in this fourth season.
Its best form.
Yeah.
Yeah. My number 9 is 1899 on Netflix, from the creators of Dark. And admittedly, this is not for everybody, but I will say this. I've seen people panning this show.
Uh-huh.
Those people are assholes. You were either in for the ride or you weren't, and that's the only way to review this show. And I was in for the ride. Admittedly, it took me 5 episodes before I was like, okay, you got me. If I had adhered to my usual rule of 3, where you give it 3 episodes and then you bounce if you're not in, I wouldn't have been in, because it just so happened that I was like, I didn't have anything else to watch at that point. We were kind of binging it, my wife and I, and so I gave it the full ride, the full season, and I'm glad I did. It was worth it. But it's a multilingual German epic period mystery science fiction television. So this is not even my words. This is the actual description. 1899 is a multilingual German epic period mystery science fiction television series created by Jonte Friese and Baron Do Oder. It premiered November of this year, November 17th on Netflix. And yeah, look, it's dark on a boat, like you said. It would be. It's
also very confusing in the current year 2022, because it's 2022, but we had 1899, but then there were 2 Yellowstone spinoffs called 1883 and 1923.
Yep.
And so whenever you say 1899, I'm like, you watched the Yellowstone prequel? No, you watched Dark on a Boat.
Yeah. We can just call it Dark on a Boat.
It takes a moment to compute. Let me ask you this: at the end of season 1, were you able to grasp the concept and or the twist?
Yes, and I'll say this. It's one that is not all that uncommon in the year 2022. There was a lot of shows and movies that sort of attacked this same concept. Really, over the last few years, there have been more and more of them, and I can't go into any more detail than that without spoiling it, but it's not what you expect at all. And that is one of the big differences between this and Dark, where I'm not saying Dark was what you expected necessarily, but the twists were, they didn't like reach into the present day. Like time travel, which is mostly what Dark dealt with, right? isn't a thing that we're aware of anyway. I don't know. So you didn't really have to like wrap your head around it being a modern issue that you were sort of delving into. That is the case more with 1899. But yeah, I really loved it, man. I really enjoyed it. It was good enough to make my top 10 in the least.
My number 9, and we might want to save this one because I'm guessing that you have it slightly higher. My number 9 is House of the Dragon.
Okay. I mean, I think that's not entirely unfair, and we can further discuss it when we get to it on my list.
Sounds great.
Because it is on there, obviously.
Yeah.
My number 8, number 8, We Own This City on HBO Max.
Yeah, this is on. So there are several shows that I did not get to this year that I know would probably have been on this list had I gotten to them. They include. I'll just read my list real quick. Their potentials. Maybe some more on yours, but I didn't get to The Crown. I did not get to Fleischman Is in Trouble. I did not get to The Boys season 4, The Offer, Slow Horses, Pachinko, Atlanta season 3 and 4, Physical season 2, The Old Man, We Own This City, and Industry.
Okay.
But I've heard
this was one of them.
I've heard, this is near the top of that list that I really, really would like to watch.
I think a lot of people are probably in the same boat as you that heard about this show, maybe were interested in watching it and didn't get around to it. It delves into a not very fun topic to discuss. It's mostly about police corruption.
What's your elevator pitch on this show?
It's an updated version of The Wire, and John Bernthal as Sergeant Wayne Jenkins is one of my favorite performances of the year.
Yeah, I've heard this is like a next level show.
He is ridiculous at this point. Like, he seriously has become one of my favorite actors. But and he's one of those guys. I watch his podcast clips every once in a while.
Does he have a podcast?
Yeah, he interviews like gang members and shit. He's so absurd. He's almost like a Daniel Day-Lewis of TV type of person, where he's just like, when you see him in his actual element and he's not acting, you're just like, this guy's he's exactly what I would have expected. He's such an actor type of person.
Yeah.
And but no, his character name is Sergeant Wayne Jenkins. It's all based on a true story, right? I mean, like, you're essentially seeing how police corruption in Baltimore got completely out of control, and it is rough. Yeah, it is a rough watch.
I tried to pitch this one to Laura, and I was like, it's about like the rot of a city and like corruption and local politics and within the police force. And
it's like, nah, fuck that. Not right now. Nope. And I get that. That's totally fair. But at some point, if you're in a happy, good place, or our society is in a more happy, good place, definitely recommend We Own This City on HBO Max. It was really, really well made. David Simon, the creator of The Wire, is the creator and writer of We Own This City as well. Production takes place in Baltimore, so it's all very authentic. And there's a lot of the actors from The Wire are in this show, and he reversed it for a lot of them. So if they were playing a gang member, they're playing a cop now. So it's like, it was really, really cool to see that. But We Own This City was my number 8.
My number 8 is The Bear, which we've been having a little bit of a conversation on our one of our group texts recently about. This was kind of like like a late summer phenomenon type of show. Pretty low budget, half-hour episodes, just kind of like spat out on FX and Hulu, and the next thing you know, it was one of the kind of the hit shows of the summer, and really kind of like minted Jeremy Allen White as a potential star. Had a lot of great performances, and people just couldn't get enough, and were really, really wrapped up in this show. I think that it's obviously it's on my list. I thought it was great. I thought it was new. I thought it was novel. It wasn't like anything I'd seen before. I think that it got a little overhyped because of that fact.
Yeah.
I think that people, kind of like I said with like the new shows. Well, if it's a new show and it's kind of doing something different than you haven't seen before, it tends to get a little overrated.
Yeah.
And there were some misses in this show for me. There was a performance that I'm not even going to call out, but I didn't love it. And I think I was supposed to like it more. Like this individual's performance, and so I kind of bumped on that a little bit. But having said that, everybody should watch it. It's a really quick binge. It's kind of fever dreamish. If you've ever worked in a restaurant, it will certainly remind you of those days. And it really, really nails that aspect of it. I know a lot of service industry workers kind of like we're also really praising it for that element of it, that it captures that kind of the ultimate intensity of working in a kitchen like that, especially like a quick fire, quick action, short order, like everything, just when you have a rush like that.
Bam, 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 bam.
Yeah. And there's one episode which is kind of the famous one, which is that got, or at least got talked about the most, which is like 22 minutes, and it's shot. It's not one long tracking shot, but it's made to look like it's one long tracking shot. So the camera basically you never cut.
Sick.
You never cut to another scene, and it's like the most hectic day basically in the restaurant's history.
Yeah.
And it's really, really intense and cool and crazy. So, totally understand why this show became what it was. It's probably higher on most lists that you'll see out there. And, I agree that it's absolutely one of the best shows of the year and worth watching, but thought it got a little bit overhyped. So if you've not watched it, that's just my warning going in. Like, don't expect it to be the best show of the year, I don't think.
That was one of the reasons I didn't watch it immediately. I mean, it was recommended to me so frequently after I think people finished that first season. People were like, Ross, you got to watch this. You're going to love so many elements of it. It's like a mental health thing too, or whatever. And I was just like, I wasn't in a place in my life where I felt comfortable diving into something that was intense as this sounded.
Yeah.
But also people were like, you are going to absolutely love it. And that made me like, want to take a step away so that I didn't have to deal with the overhype issue.
There's definitely like one of the main themes of the season and one of the catalysts of the show itself is like, our star character, our main character dealing with grief and trauma, which certainly is an engine behind the show, and Jeremy Allen White plays unbelievably. How about this? I'll give you this. Somewhere along the line, there's a John Bernthal cameo.
No shit.
Which is, again, one of the best things that happens in the entire season.
Dude, he's awesome.
Really, really good.
Also, Jeremy Allen White, I know from Shameless.
Yeah.
Which for the first, I want to say 4 seasons, was one of my favorite shows on TV. And then it was one of those things where it was just like, all right, I fucking get it. You know what I mean? I think they did like 11 seasons.
Classic Showtime.
Yes. They just don't know when to stop.
Very easily could have ended after 6 seasons, maybe 7. And they're like, let's do 11.
Why not keep going? Yeah. All right, my number 7 is Winning Time.
Okay. This is on my honorable mentions.
On HBO Max. It's a dramatic look at the glitz and glamour of the 1980s Los Angeles Lakers and really just 1980s Los Angeles and the Lakers, with Dr. Jerry Buss, the owner of the Lakers at that time, and Magic Johnson sort of being the focal points. And just as a huge NBA guy, this one was like, I'm a huge NBA and HBO person. There's no way I wasn't going to absolutely love this. And I thought, it's difficult to make a sports-focused show, television show, or movie, frankly, interesting to a broader audience.
Yep.
And this is one that I was able to watch with my wife, and she really enjoyed it. Because from a storytelling perspective, they executed very well. It's one of the reasons it made my list and made it my list in front of a few other shows, because I was super impressed with how they were able to open up this story to where sort of anybody, you don't even have to be a sports person, you don't have to be an NBA person or a basketball fan to enjoy it, and to see why the story is worth telling, because there are so many elements of it that are super unique and stand out, especially for the time period in the 80s. So yeah, I'm excited for season 2. Whenever that drops, I think it's going to be next year.
Yeah, I think, whether this is fair or not, I feel like I bumped it off of my top 10 because when I thought back to what I remembered most about the show, it was almost like the visuals of the show.
Yeah.
It was like the gritty screen and like the weird kind of cuts between different camera styles of camera footage and like some of the little stylized elements, which I loved while watching it. But like it almost, it like kind of superseded some of the actual content of the story itself. I just barely knocked it off. It's definitely on my honorable mentions, though. You made a great point. Laura really liked watching this show as well, which I was very surprised at.
What's this dude's name that created it? I guess it's Max Bornstein and Jim Hecht.
But Adam McKay is
There you
an
go.
EP on it and directed the first episode.
And it's very much in his style.
And he loves that shit. And the first episode has a ton of it.
Yes.
Big shouts to John C. Reilly. This was one of my he is going all out on this Jerry Buss character and not buttoning up any of his buttons on his shirt.
Right.
And it was a lot of fun.
Well, it's one of the things I liked so much about it is that they were not afraid to lean into the controversy of the main characters. Like, they did not make Jerry Buss look like a saint by any means.
No.
The Buss family is extremely upset with this show. I think HBO is being sued from like six different directions.
Jerry West and his family also very upset.
Yeah, Jerry West wouldn't stop complaining about how they made him look like a raging asshole, which ironically made Jerry West in real life. It made it even more accurate. Yeah. But no, if you love the NBA and you love HBO, it's an easy win. But regardless of if you love the NBA, it's very good storytelling. So that was my number. What was 7?
My number 7 is Barry, season 3.
Okay,
which I finally got through a couple of weeks ago. I'd fallen off of that one, watching it on time. I think, speaking of shows that aren't like anything else on TV, this one really, really stands out to me as kind of like the full-on torchbearer for a half-hour show that is simultaneously super funny, usually in a very dark way, but also extremely dramatic and also in a very dark way. But the elements and the things that this show plays around with, and the cinematography and the way that they shoot stuff and the way that they capture LA and the way that they do like action sequences, but also, just like normal in a room kind of comedy sequences. It's just like, it's this insane marriage that I don't like, shouldn't really work, but somehow does. And I always leave this show just kind of blown away and impressed by what it's doing.
what they're able to pull off. Yeah,
what they're able to pull off. I think that I'm really curious how long they think this show's going to go, because it feels like it's got to be close to an end game. And so I'm super interested to see how they start to wrap it all up. This last season kind of ends at a spot where you feel like they have to be, headed towards that light at the end of the tunnel. But another phenomenal season from them that just like is one of the best things on TV.
Barry is probably the show I feel the most shame about not being caught up with, because it is just so, I speak often about how much I love that marriage of like dark comedy and action and like being able to pull off very serious life conversations about life and humanity, and then also mixing in just like the dumbest shit in the world, which is what Barry, when I finished season 1, I mean, I loved it. It was phenomenal. It was everything I ever wanted in a TV show. And again, it just is like with the overwhelming wave of incredible TV that has been put out over the past several years, it just kind of got lost in the shuffle for me.
This season also has, I'll add a, do you remember Chad Goes Deep?
Oh yeah.
He's got
I've seen his cameo.
Okay, yeah. He's got a part in one episode of this show. I was watching and I was like, wait, is that Chad Goes Deep guy? Is that the Chad Goes Deep guy? And it is.
It's Chad of Chad and JT Go Deep.
That's right.
I interviewed them at one point on RBP.
I know.
On the Ross Bolen podcast.
So that was kind of cool. And then the first season and then kind of bleeding into the second season had a lot of LA and industry commentary, but like about like acting and about acting classes and about how all that happens. This season we kind of moved that into like really making fun of like algorithms and streaming services and like some of that stuff. And so that's another element that I find really entertaining, is its commentary on the entertainment industry as a whole as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things I loved about season 1, and I'm that's near the top, man. Like, admittedly, the reason it kind of fell off for me is darker stuff became less appealing to me over the last few years. I've talked a lot about this, but because of the pandemic and like I went through a divorce and had a bunch of mental health stuff go down, it wasn't as easy for me to go to the dark places that typically are my favorite places to go with entertainment. So it was a really big shift, honestly. But it is the reason Barry kind of was one of the things that fell to the wayside. And I've just not gone back yet. And 2023 might be the year.
You know what I fell off of because of the pandemic? In that same vein, but in a different direction. I basically won't watch like murder, true crime anymore.
Just too much of it.
Yeah.
And we got inundated by it too, right?
We really did, but like I can't like I'm not gonna do Dahmer. I'm not gonna do any of the Ted Bundy shit. I couldn't do like.
Ironically, I did Dahmer.
I can't. Is it on your list?
No, no, it's not.
I can't do the California, San Francisco Golden Gate Killer thing or anything like that. Like we're watching The Vow, the second portion of that documentary on HBO.
My
right
wife's
now.
been watching it.
And that's like that's good for me. Give me all the sex cult stuff, but I can't. Once it gets into like brutal murder, I'm out now.
Yeah. Look, I only did Dahmer because what's his name? The Evan Ross or whatever his name
Evan
is.
Peters, yeah.
Evan Peters. Thank you. I don't know why I tried to make his last name my first name, but or middle name technically. But yeah, I really like that dude. He's one of my favorite actors too. So I was willing to do the Dahmer show against sort of my my best instincts because I was just like, oh fuck it, I like this guy. And it was worth it. It was a complex enough telling. This is the only thing I'll say about Dahmer. It was a complex enough telling of the Jeffrey Dahmer story to make it worth making. Because at first my concern was like, we know he was a psychopath.
Right.
He ate people. It wasn't good, right? Nobody's happy it happened.
Yeah.
Why do we need to see another thing about it? But it ended up being worth it. So but it's not making my list.
All right, you're number 6.
The Rings of Power, season 1. And look, I'm going to do a full episode on this still that's going to be coming out soon, so I'm not going to say much, but I will say this. After I finished season 1, I mean, really, when I got like 3 episodes in, I was like, yeah, this is okay. Because Barrett said, like, I got 15 minutes in and bounced. That's totally acceptable. If you are not a huge, and I mean, you really, it's not just like you saw Lord of the Rings and you were like, yeah, those were solid. Like, you have to be one of these people like me who's rewatched them a half a dozen times or whatever at a minimum and I've watched them probably 30 fucking times. I love Lord of the Rings. Those movies are like one of my like safe places. Like when it's nighttime and I don't really know what the hell I want to watch and I don't have much brain capacity left, I'll just throw on Fellowship of the Ring for the 480th time because I like going there. It's fun to me. I enjoy the lore of it all. And what the Rings of Power is essentially in the same way that House of the Dragon operates as like a prequel to Game of Thrones, right? Not really a prequel, but it is setting up this universe that you later spend way more time in. If you enjoyed Game of Thrones, you'll probably like House of the Dragon for that reason, especially longer term, right? So much of season 1 was set up.
Yeah.
Season 1 of Rings of Power, and I mean, you know, if the name didn't give it away already, it's about how these Rings of Power come to be and how what you end up seeing later in Lord of the Rings. You know, remember the first Lord of the Rings, how the first 20 minutes is like them being like, long ago, these Rings of Power were made, and one by one, the men and the elves and everybody fell to the Rings of Power, and there's this Sauron guy who's the bad guy. And,
Yeah.
Well, that is the very quick telling of what Rings of Power deals with, and you get into way more detail. And it's like fun re-meeting some of the characters that you later deal with in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the original trilogy, on this TV show. Plus, look, Amazon spent $1 bajillion on this, so it looks phenomenal. Like, from a visual standpoint, it is really, really fun to take on all the scenery. And I really liked it, man. But again, admittedly, very biased here. Like, I'm a huge LOTR nerd, and not even in the way that like some of our friends are. Like, one of our boys that's coming to mind like is a total psycho about Lord of the Rings.
Right.
I don't take it that far in the same way that I don't take it that far with Game of Thrones and George R. R. Martin's lore.
I feel like you had a really like formative experience with the original trilogy.
For sure. Yeah.
Because I don't obviously we cover the Game of Thrones universe in great detail, but like I don't really think of you as like a high fantasy guy.
I'm not. That's one of the things about it that, I mean, it, in the same way that Game of Thrones just really, really hit for me. Like, where I enjoyed, like, it's not the same adult themes that Game of Thrones got into. It's more of like a pretty simple good versus evil.
Right.
But it's also got like underlying elements to it regarding like temptation and how, you know, your decision making over time really can end up putting you in a really bad spot. Like, there are adult themes and lessons that come through Lord of the Rings that I've understood better as I've gotten older. And just getting a pre-telling of all this is pretty magical to me.
Do you feel attached to, at the end of the season 1 of Rings of Power, do you feel attached to any characters? Do you really, really like any of the characters? Like,
No, and that's kind of the difference. Like where with Frodo and Samwise in Lord of the Rings, you're like, those are the dudes you're rooting for. It's very obvious that you're supposed to enjoy
Gandalf's
them.
super cool.
Yeah, Gandalf's fucking
Gandalf.
awesome.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not. I can't say too much. All right, but it's not the same. It's not as good in terms of all around entertainment value as the original Lord of the Rings sequel. But also, that was never my expectation. I was pretty much going to be happy if Bezos and Amazon could just not fuck this up. And to me, they didn't. But also, again, because I loved Lord of the Rings enough that this was always going to be something I was into on some level. But it just ended up, almost cracked my top 5 here.
Yeah.
Because I enjoyed it so much. And it was chill, man. That was the other piece of this for me. I didn't have to worry about the next episode of The Rings of Power scaring the shit out of me or causing me to be so stressed that I needed to go take a fucking Xanax. Like, it was just going to be chill, right? That it was enjoyable. So, yeah.
My number 6 is Hacks, which had its second season this year on HBO Max. It's the best comedy on TV.
No shit.
Jean Smart is an absolute revelation. And that's why she's in like everything right now, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, she's having a hell of a moment for an older broad, especially.
Yeah, and I really don't feel a need to elaborate in a bunch of different ways. It's extremely well written. The chemistry between the two leads is just kind of unrivaled for me on TV right now, and it's the best. It's classic HBO, comedy. It reminds me of stuff like Veep or, any of those like half-hour shows.
It's witty.
It's super witty.
Is it about stand-up comedy?
It's about it. It is about a stand-up comedian. Yes.
Okay.
Who had
I'm surprised this one hasn't been recommended to me more.
Yeah, it's about a veteran stand-up comedian who has a residency in Vegas and is kind of like is starting to season 1. This kind of deals with this. Is starting to fall out of favor. She's getting long in the tooth. She's been doing the same routine for 20 years, but she's got like all this. But she actually has this super super rich kind of like backstory and a lot of places. A lot of depths to plumb basically. And this kind of new upstart millennial, writer who's been cast out from LA is essentially like assigned to work for her. And it's their relationship as they bond and grow and fight and do all that. And how she kind of like pulls out this new version of her where she is learning to basically like be a comedian again.
Like revitalizing herself.
Revitalizing her
cool.
career. Yeah.
Sick. Well, this is going near the top of my list to start now too.
Yeah.
Right on. All right, let's get into the top 5
Top
here.
5, baby.
My number 5 is The Offer on Paramount Plus. Look, it feels, again, I'm applying some bias here because in the same way that Rings of Power is on my list because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, I fucking love the Godfather movies. And not for the reasons they say in The White Lotus Season 2, but I love The Godfather. And The Offer ended up it's essentially the producer of The Godfather, Al Ruddy's experience making the 1972 film, and him working with Francis Ford Coppola, who directed it and wrote it and adapted the book. And it is just a shitload of fun. What's the name of the dude from Top Gun Maverick? It's not
Miles
Tom Cruise.
Teller.
Miles Teller is essentially the star of this show. And he crushes, man. He is Al Ruddy. He plays Al Ruddy, the producer. But it's so much, like for the same reason you love Barry, because it gets into the Hollywood.
Yep, the industry aspects.
The industry aspects. This does that a lot, but with movies, right? Specifically with the cinema side of things. And it taught me stuff about movies that I didn't know, about how the movie industry works, even more so than I already knew. It really does a good job of getting you emotionally attached to a lot of the different characters to where, I mean, it has one of the actresses from, what's the soccer show on Apple TV Plus?
Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso, thank you. It has the chick from Ted Lasso who plays like Ted's like assistant person, whatever her name is.
Yeah. Juno Temple.
Yes, and but in the same way that Ted Lasso kind of gets you like rooting for everybody in a feel-good way, that's what The Offer does. It's just a little bit different because you know the end of the story, right? You know the movie comes out. You know it crushes and becomes one of the classic films in history. But that's another reason I give it so much credit. Even knowing how it ends, I didn't know all the details about how this shit got made and the complicated nature of like Al Ruddy's relationship with the actual mafia in New York City that unfolds as a result of them trying to get this done, because it's back in the 70s when the mafia still had a hold in New York City, and they sort of had to get approval from the actual mafia to make The Godfather. And it was really, really cool. So yeah, no, easily.
Kind of ties in a little bit to The Sopranos there, because all those guys are obsessed with it.
Yes.
It's almost like they have the long-standing knowledge that
that there was a tie-in,
that there was a tie-in, and they kind of did potentially give their blessing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, it's for sure. And it's another element of it that just made me appreciate it even more, because while The Sopranos had all these Godfather references, I always took it as an on-the-nose appreciation for The Godfather because it tells sort of these guys' story. But no, the Mafia had a real impact on the making of The Godfather, and you get into all of that with The Offer. Again, on Paramount Plus, phenomenally well done. I hope it gets, I don't know if it'll be nominated or if it has been nominated for much. I hope it does. It should be. It was great. That's my number 5.
My number 5 is the final season of Better Call Saul.
Wow.
For me, if you've been listening to this podcast long, you know that I am not the biggest fan of Breaking Bad. This show cannot exist without Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
But I find it's pitched a little bit differently, and these last few seasons had the big Breaking Bad element where they kind of like split the story into almost two, and you kind of have two main stars. You're kind of like you're watching Saul Jimmy McGill, Saul Goodman / Jimmy McGill, and his path, and then you also have Mike Ehrmantraut and Gus Fring, and those are like two storylines that are kind of like, they are parallel. And then occasionally they kind of like cross over and bob and weave together, and it's that's an element of the storytelling that's really, really well done on this show. But for me, this show was better from a viewing experience than it was for me for Breaking Bad. I just thought it had more characters to like. I thought it had more relatability. I thought it had deeper and more like connective emotion.
No Aaron Paul.
It did not have any Aaron Paul yelling "science bitch" at me.
I feel like that was your main thing. I do. I like, you and I have spent, we've talked about this ad nauseum, how you didn't like Breaking Bad. Yeah. And when it all comes down to it, my read is that Aaron Paul just destroyed it for you.
That's totally possible. Yeah. Because I also hated El Camino. I thought that was trash.
Look, I'm not a big Aaron Paul guy, and admittedly, his character in Breaking Bad does great on you.
Yeah.
But it never really took me out of it for some reason.
And then just to couple final things I'll say about Better Call Saul. Like, from what I understand, a lot of the same team. Obviously, you had Vince Gilligan and what was the other guy's name? It's Vince Gilligan and there's a second co-creator of Better Call Saul.
I'll do the Google.
Yeah, do the Google. But so with those two, and then a lot of the same, staff and crew and all that.
Peter Gould.
Peter Gould. Thank you. Yeah, Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould. So it's kind of like this was almost like their second run.
Right.
And you could feel that they kind of like were able to correct some things that maybe they wish they'd done a little differently.
That makes sense.
Like it's just all a little bit more polished. It's all a little bit smoother. It just
they furthered their chemistry even more as creators.
They did. Yeah. And they really just had this like, this Albuquerque thing just so locked in.
Down to a science, bitch.
And then you and I, we always talk about like how much finales actually matter.
Yeah.
Whether sticking a finale matters or doesn't matter that much, whether it's the lead up and the journey and all of that. And obviously that stems from large conversations that we continue to have about Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Unbelievable finale for Better Call Saul. I mean, they just absolutely like kicked in the door and fucking nailed it. And they get a lot of credit for that.
I think the origin of the finale conversation for you and I, really, if you took it all the way back, would be Seinfeld. Because Seinfeld had such a controversial finale. I saw a clip with Jerry on CNN right after the finale with what's the really famous CNN guy with the glasses? he's old as shit. He's retired
Larry
now.
King.
Larry King. He's on Larry King, and Larry King asks him a question, Jerry. He asks him, and you didn't get canceled. You canceled them. You've probably seen this clip at some point because Jerry Seinfeld becomes extremely offended. And he's like, you don't know this? You don't know that I had the #1 television show on TV? I walked away at the top. He's like, 75 million viewers for the finale, Larry. Do I need to get a resume in here for you? Like, he's really genuinely upset that Larry King...
Is this old or is this
very
recent?
old. It's right after it ended. After they went off the air. And Larry King kind of tries to make a joke that Jerry... It's not just that he doesn't understand the Larry King joke. It's that he doesn't appreciate it. Gets super offended. But that was a finale that a lot of Seinfeld fans were like, well, that was shit. People either loved it or they hated it. It was extremely polarizing, not in the same way as Game of Thrones, where I think just everyone hated it, but that was sort of the original series finale the first time I ever really considered like the importance or non-importance of actually landing it with that final episode or whatever. And a totally different kind of show, a comedy, obviously.
Also, Bob Odenkirk and Ray Seahorn both, they keep getting nominated for Emmys, but then they keep getting passed over. So to a degree, the show is kind of underrated in a way.
Sure.
Like I only occasionally hear about it, and for a show that is so critically appreciated, you know, that like maybe Bob Odenkirk will win this year for the final season of it. But and by win I mean the Emmy, but probably not. Somebody like such and such from Succession or whatever other show that's like more popular and bigger and flashier is probably going to take it.
Well, I feel like they suffer from Breaking Bad having had so much success critically too.
I think that's probably right as well. But man, hard for me to imagine that any huge Breaking Bad fans outside of yourself have not watched this show.
Yeah. Same reason.
But
I've already given it thrice today.
But if you've never watched Breaking Bad or you didn't care for Breaking Bad, I would
give it a shot.
Absolutely say give this show a shot because it's an awesome ride.
This is on my list. It's a complicated one because I don't think my wife has any desire to watch it, and I don't know when I'm going to mix it.
The first two seasons especially are like are seasons that I loved because they get into like this like doc review legalese like kind of which I know is like a lot of that's really slow for some people.
I've seen the first two seasons. Yeah. Those are the only two I've seen. And it was a little slower. It was the reason I didn't feel uncomfortable sort of leaving it on the shelf to come back to later. And then as the other seasons progressed, more and more discussions I started seeing online shit.
I think it's season 3 where they bring in Gus. And then you basically get the Breaking Bad storyline along with the Jimmy legal lawyer storyline.
Which is exciting, yeah. My number 4 is The White Lotus season 2.
Okay.
And I don't think I need to expand upon that. We just did the entire series in podcast form. So
that's right.
But yeah, I loved it, man. It was great. I thought, like I said repeatedly, I thought it was a step up. That season 1, as great as it was, this was even better to me. And I think the way it's going to operate for The White Lotus is it's going to depend what themes Mike White attacks in that season, right? Because we've got friends who were like, I literally hated season 2 compared to season 1.
Well, they didn't say that, but yes.
But that it was a big step down for them, right? Like, basically, that it wasn't up their alley the same way.
I wasn't sure. Yeah, I know what comment you're referring to, and I wasn't sure how to interpret it, honestly. I actually think that some of the things that we touched on as to why we liked the second season so much are the same things that made it less enjoyable for that friend. And like there's pieces of you talked about how like the show led to you having, you know, kind of a
serious conversation with your partner.
Yeah. And some people probably like recoiled from those things on the screen as well. And
for sure.
I know that like watching those two couples is what I loved the most about season 2. But for some people, especially in our peer group, that's probably what kind of like drew them out of it a little bit. So
yeah, not everybody's looking to go to a fucking therapy session, right? Like I get that. It's totally acceptable. I'm just saying, for me, I feel like that's my read on what Mike White is doing now is like it's really going to depend on what issues he attacks with each season, whether or not they resonate with each of us individually based on what we've got going on in our lives and our personal preferences, etc. But White Lotus, look, my top 5. All could have been 2 through 5. Look, my number 1 is my number 1, and I don't think it's changeable. But everything else in 2 through 5, you could have put anywhere in there because they were all so good, and this is one of them. The White Lotus season 2 was phenomenal.
Yeah, I had I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I flip flopped on 1 and 2 a little bit. And then as we get into my number 4, I'll also say that I flip-flopped on 3 and 4 too.
Okay.
So that my like I had my 1 and 2, and then I had my 3 and 4, and then for me like 5 through 10, like I really could have like tossed in any order.
Yeah.
So number 4 for me, what I landed on is Severance.
Okay.
Yeah. Is this on your list?
Oh yeah.
A little bit higher?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's wait.
Okay.
What's your number 3?
Andor season 1.
Okay. Good spot to talk about Andor. It's my number 2. That's
Cool.
what I went back and forth between my number 1 and Andor.
It should be my number 2, but it's my number 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have not had a huge discussion about this, but I don't know that there was a show that I looked forward to watching more. Like,
I can't agree with you there because it was so stressful for me.
Okay.
But I kind of binged it more than I think most people did.
Yeah.
Because I was behind.
You had most of the episodes to watch. I was watching this week to week, and I was like looking forward to Thursday nights the same way that I do for Sunday nights for a big HBO show.
Yeah.
And this was a thrilling spy espionage show that lived in the Star Wars universe, and somehow that didn't matter. It added to it, and I just found it just a complete. This and my number 1 show. They're there because they are such complete statements. They stay the same tonally throughout. They know exactly what they want to do, and they just execute on it to a degree that I didn't see on other shows this year.
It was shocking to me, honestly. This is one look. In the same way that I didn't watch The Bear because it was overhyped, the overhype with Andor it was such a fever pitch that I was like, fine, like I broke, and I ended up starting the show after I believe episode 10 had aired or 9, and I was caught up by the time the finale aired. Because I was so fucking hooked, I couldn't stop. Like, it was all we did for a week and a half. Like,
yeah.
I got home from work, and me and my wife watched Andor, and we watched it until we were ready to go to sleep, and then we did it again the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day, until we were all the way caught up, because I've never been, like, more pulled into... And again, it being a Star Wars thing, I mean, you know, Star Wars is all right. I could take it or leave it. I don't really give a shit. Like you said earlier, like you don't strike me as the biggest high fantasy guy. Star Wars is an example of a fantasy sci-fi situation that, while I understand its place in American cinematic lore and history, I also just don't give a shit. I always make fun of George Lucas for being a terrible storyteller and writing dog shit dialogue.
Yeah.
Like, the original 3 Star Wars are silly as fuck. It's the most simplistic version of storytelling you could possibly do. There's a good guy, there's a bad guy. The only obvious wrinkle being that he finds out Darth Vader is his dad, which everybody knows.
But here's what this show did. Like, at the core of that original trilogy and of the whole of all of it, I guess, is this idea of a rebellion, right?
Yes.
There's the big bad empire who's a fascist, authoritarian regime that has cracked down on all the little guys.
Yes.
And somewhere, somebody is fostering a rebellion. This thing is bubbling and simmering. But all the movies, they don't spend time on that. They don't tell you how or why or what or really, and the only thing they do is who. And you get you get some heroes like Rey and the new ones, and Luke and Leia and the originals and whoever else. This show went adult with it. It went human with it. It said, we don't care about the alien whose name is slipping my mind that
Jar Jar Binks?
That shot definitely didn't care about Jar Jar Binks. Greedo? That's the alien that he and Han Solo.
Oh yeah.
Who shot
first?
Right?
God, that sucks.
They don't care about the cantina. They don't care about any of the aliens. They want it. It actually is asking a real question. How does a rebellion start?
And what are the sacrifices that have to be made?
What does the government have to do to ignite a rebellion? How far do they have to push it till the people finally say enough? And then what does it take? How does it happen? What are the sacrifices? What is the actual human and person collateral of all that?
Yeah, the toll of it all.
Yeah.
And it was the thing for me that really, look, Game of Thrones, end of season 1, we all know what happens. And it added a weight to the show that, oh my God, anyone could die at any moment, that stays with you throughout the entire rest of it until you hit season 7, and then it kind of falls apart. And that's what Andor accomplished early on, somehow without actually, no spoilers. I'll just stop myself in that sentence there. But you these little mini stories start to unfold where people are dropping like flies episode to episode, and you're like, well, I thought that guy was going to be coming with me to the next episode or might be a part of a longer storyline, and like it keeps not working out that way to where it really lays the weight of what it would take to start the rebellion that then this whole universe, like you just said, is built off of. All of these other movies and all of it is based on the fact that there is a rebellion, and Andor, if you wanted to give the shortest elevator pitch possible, is how that rebellion began. And it's amazingly well done. That was my number 3. I said it should have been my number 2 because House of the Dragon was my number 2. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is Euphoria.
Oh, man. I completely forgot that show aired this year.
Look, I remember tweeting about this, but I was like, somebody, I think I was talking about in the little last arc of the episodes where Maude Apatow's character puts on the high school play, and how it was the best thing I'd seen on TV all year. Still stands out as that it's like a top 5 episode of television for me, or episodes, because it's kind of it bridges 2 episodes if I recall correctly. And somebody was like, this show doesn't make like narrative sense, like it doesn't it doesn't have like a single through line. And I'm like, that I just said that's not what this show is about. This show is not about narrative storytelling. Like it's a vibe of a show,
right?
And I talked about like the vision and how well they executed on I thought they executed on Andor and White Lotus. Sam Levinson, it's not as total of a package or as complete and like as effectual as those other two shows were for me, but man, he is doing what he wants to be doing with this show, and it's surreal to watch. Like
the performances are insane.
This shit is nuts. It's really, really nuts. And he can go from. Did you watch the 2 bridge episodes in between? Yeah. So he can do a 70-minute show that's literally 2 people sitting in a diner, and it's some of the deepest shit it's some of the realest shit you've ever wrote.
Yes.
And then he can do episodes. Did you watch this most recent season?
Yes.
Yeah. So he can do episodes like the full-on like Rue meltdown.
Right.
Where this is I mean, nearing Requiem for a Dream territory, where it's just like tearing your heart out, like that people go through this, and that the way that addiction can harm individuals and the people surrounding them. And then it can do Training Day style thriller drug mule episode shit to an amazing degree. And then it can do a high school musical. That's one of the funnest things I saw all year. And it's got, I mean, Sydney Sweeney, like Zendaya, obviously, like the performances are killer. Like it's minting stars. It's minting young Hollywood. Like it's great. It's just wild. It's absolutely wild. But like, it's such a, all of that just kind of coalesces for me, and it's near the top of my list because it's such kind of a jaw-dropping just piece of art.
It's a spectacle.
It's a spectacle.
It really
word.
is.
Yeah.
Look, it aired in January, and I completely forgot that Euphoria, what was it, season 2? Season 2, yeah, because we had the long break, the pandemic, the 2 solo episodes, siloed episodes, and then season 2 dropped. This was easily one of my favorite things I saw this year. Let's just slot it in as 2.5 for me. Okay. And because if I had remembered that it aired in 2022, I would have put it on my list. It is ridiculous how good it is. I can't say it better than you just did, so I won't even try to. My number 2, or do you have something else?
Nope. House of the Dragon.
My number 2 is House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
And look, almost completely out of bias for the fact that I was so anxious for how they would handle this show.
Yeah.
Right? Like HBO and this podcast, frankly, had so much riding on what was going to happen with Game of Thrones as a universe and whether or not they would be able to accomplish another show that even came close to what the first several seasons of Game of Thrones were able to do. Patty Considine as Viserys probably is like the cornerstone of the reason this show was so good to me. This first season was so good to me.
Yeah, one of my favorite performances of the year, no question.
And I just thought what they were able to pull off from the nature of how complicated this was going to be, to get through season 1, to set up for the rest of the series, to go through, what was it, like 20 years of storytelling that we hit here in the first season, and to do the time jumps and all of the bullshit and the actor and actress changes that we had to endure.
Yep.
to pull it off in a way that made me and everyone else watching happy was going to be one hell of a challenge. And the fact that they did it is what bumped it so high up my list. Because admittedly, I love talking about what goes down in Westeros more than I love almost anything. And the fact that they did it in a way that made you and I able to enjoy it together and talk about it every week. And now that being said, I also understand why it's your number 9. Because it didn't accomplish anything particularly like noteworthy in terms of originality, right?
Sure.
It really didn't.
Yep.
I mean, other than having to deal with the amount of time jumps, but that's not like all that crazy when you really think about it on paper. So I get that too. For me, the bias and the overwhelming joy I felt that having, in my opinion, felt like they accomplished what they needed to accomplish, bumped it way the hell up.
I thought they did a phenomenal job of bringing us back to that universe and making a new Game of Thrones show that I found super compelling and enjoyable and that I was excited to watch every Sunday and, of course, come in here and talk about. The reason why, I'm not going to relitigate the things that I didn't like about the season, although I will say, I will relitigate one point.
Okay.
If you're spending fucking $250 million on a season of television or whatever it cost, you cannot film night scenes at daylight and do the beach episode.
Yeah,
I still don't know
why.
You can't do it. Your HBO, the show is too expensive. Just wait until you have the right night. Okay. Anyway, what I was going to say, the reason why it's a little bit lower on my list is because when the season wrapped, the first thought that I had was basically like, season 2 is going to be so good.
Yeah.
And it's like what I'm looking for in these in my top seasons of television of the year is like, there's no way they can do better than that. Right? Yeah. They set the bar so high, and then they're going to have to catapult themselves over it somehow. With House of the Dragon, I'm pretty sure season 2 is going to be better.
I agree.
So that's why it's lower on my list.
Yeah, it was a setup season.
Yeah.
Which is odd, but for a whole season to function that way, it was kind of a new thing. But yeah. All right. So what was your number 2?
So that makes my number 2 Andor, and your number 1 is going to be Severance.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about last.
Yeah.
My number 1 is The White Lotus. The only thing that I enjoyed talking more than Westeros this year was The White Lotus.
Yeah.
I also
I'm so happy it made you number 1.
It's recency bias. It's maybe a little, but what I just said, like, I can't believe he made a season of television that elevated itself from season 1. It was such a crazy kind of cool new thing that we weren't expecting, and it was so good, and it felt like he just kind of captured lightning in a bottle. There was no way season 2 was going to be better than that. And then it was, and it was different, and it was new, and it hit different buttons and pushed and played different notes that were all incredible. It had the balls to take out one of its main muse style characters. Like, it was just, and then I the way that it, look, I always, when I'm stacking up these shows, like being a part of the monoculture and the zeitgeist really helps. And the way that Ross, everybody wanted to talk to me about
it.
This
tapped
show.
in
More than maybe not more than House of the Dragon.
I mean, right there.
But right there with it. Like, whether I was at a party or a dinner or at work or like, people wanted to talk about this show. We had more success on social media than we did with House of the Dragon, I'm pretty sure.
Which is bizarre, yes.
With our White Lotus clips. Like, the fact that this took off the way that it did and got recognized by the public, even though it's kind of a weird show.
Hell yeah, it
was just phenomenal to me. And so it's my favorite thing of the year.
Look, it could have been my number 1. I mean, especially hearing you rehash it. Honestly, I've faded myself. I was like, no, recency bias is the reason you're going to try to put this in your top 3. You've got to bump it down further. And I guess in the end, look, my number 1 is Severance for one reason and one reason alone. It's, well, really, the reason it's my number 1 was the holy shit value. There was more episodes of Severance that ended where I went, holy shit.
Yeah.
Than with any other show I watched this year, where I was just like, I cannot wait to see what is going to happen next. But it also it got a lot of the bump that you hit on this earlier. The originality of it
totally
was sort of unrivaled for me, where I was
agree.
just like, this is so crazy. And I fucking love Ben Stiller, dude. He's one of my comedy icons growing up. To see him pull something off that's much more artistic and heady and requires you to really think, is crazy. Like, you and I have spent fucking years on this show making Zoolander jokes and shit, like, which is pretty much the opposite of this.
Right.
And I'm still, when I think back to watching Severance season 1, like, I was just in awe of it the whole way through.
Yeah.
And I knew there were people who said the first few episodes were kind of a slog. Like, I didn't feel that way because from the get-go, I could feel the spark of like, okay, something special is happening here.
Yep.
And the deeper we got into it, the more, again, the holy shit factor was off the charts for me.
I thought the visuals absolutely stunning. Like the probably the made the most impact out of any show on this list for me. Like, I can just picture the hallway and the work environment and like the set design on the show also was like very new and like didn't feel like anything I'd ever seen before. And really
perfectly
just
depressing.
Yes. Speaking of Ben Stiller going the opposite way, Adam Scott also kind of gets to play like this kind of new thing for him where it's, it has an Adam Scottness to it, but it's definitely far more serious and deeper than I feel like most of the stuff he's gotten a chance to do. So he thought he was awesome. This is a great example of a show that's like, how are they going to clear this bar? Like, how are they going to do better?
It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
But Ben Stiller seems to absolutely know what he's doing with this show. And I mean, this was, it was my number 4. And it was the one that I mentioned. Like, I could have swapped this one in Euphoria to put it at number 3, I think.
Ben Stiller said season 1 took them 2 years to make. 2 years.
Yeah.
So they have started filming season 2, but we don't have a clue when that's gonna. They started in October.
Okay,
but like it could be 2024.
Yeah,
because it's like he just basically on Twitter he said like you're just gonna have to wait. I mean like it'll be ready when it's ready basically, which I'm totally cool with.
Yeah,
because I can rewatch season 1 between now and then. But yeah, there are gonna be 8 new cast members in season 2 of Severance, including Gwendolyn Christie from Game of Thrones fame.
She was just in Wednesday.
I know. My dad's watching Wednesday, which shocked me, and he sent me a screenshot of Gwendolyn Christie in it. I had no idea she was in there. But also, the cast of Severance was probably the best of the year all around for me.
Okay.
Where you had Adam Scott as Mark, Zach Cherry as Dylan, who's now in commercials and cracks me up for that reason. But John Turturro as Irving. You got Christopher Walken as Bert, Patricia Arquette as Harmony Corbell. Tremel Tillman is a dude I was not familiar with before. He plays Milchick.
Oh, yeah.
Who was like one of the reasons that the show was as eerie as it was. He was so fucking good.
Incredible performance.
Michael Chernus as Rickon was like the comedic relief. He was awesome, but all around, I mean, Britt Lauer.
Britt Lauer, I'm glad you said her name.
As Helly.
As Helly. She was the one that I was like, who is this? Like looking her up like...
Why have I never seen this woman before?
Because everybody else, you know who John Turturro and Christopher Walken are, but she was like, why? She feels like a star. Like, why is she not in more stuff?
Yeah, and it just played with so many different things, and all in all, ended up being my number 1 because I couldn't like sit with myself making it any lower. Yeah.
I think by putting that number 1 going into 2023 though, you've officially eliminated your excuse that you can't watch things because they're dark. Because
I know
this show's pretty. It
is.
It has some very depressing elements.
I get the difference is like I didn't know it was going to be going in.
Okay,
I had no idea what I was getting into. So like as it unfolded, I was just sort of forced to swallow it. And frankly, because like, dude, I'm lucky in that my job is not in a traditional office environment. I don't have normal hours.
Yep.
I don't have a boss. It's me running Bolen Media and doing my best to make as many shows as I can every week and entertain people. And I'm just like, it didn't destroy me in the same way for that reason. Like I know for a lot of people who watch this show and have to go to a 9 to 5 and sit in a cubicle,
sure,
it kind of made you want to die. But it was, that was probably one of the reasons I was able to get away with it a little bit more. But also because I had no idea what I was getting into. So yeah, no, it was great.
Do you want to run through some honorable mentions real quick?
Yeah, and then I think we'll have to save movies.
Yeah, I think we got to save movies
because we're over an hour here.
Yeah.
Let's do the honorable mentions and we can roll.
So 3 shows that I watched this year, but were actually 2021 shows, so they were not eligible. Was the 3rd season of Sex Education on Netflix, Station 11 on HBO, and Yellow Jackets on Showtime.
Oh, Yellow Jackets for sure.
All 3 really good shows worth watching.
Station 11, I get a lot of flags for me when I see stuff about it. I'm like, I think I would really enjoy this, and I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah. And then I had Winning Time on my honorable mentions list. Stranger Things season 4, not really like close to making my list, but it was fun to watch with everybody this summer.
Haven't watched it yet.
3 female-driven comedies that I find incredibly enjoyable are Sex Lives of College Girls on HBO Max, Girls 5 Eva, which had its 2nd or 3rd season on Peacock, but is now moving to Netflix. And then this one, totally out of left field. I don't know how I got onto this show, but I watched every episode. It's a new show called Single Drunk Female. It's a Freeform original.
Okay.
About a girl who has kind of like everything, like has this big marketing job that she loves. Turns out she's an alcoholic. She has to go sober, move back in with her mom in her hometown, and start figuring her life out. But it's like a 30-minute comedy, I just thought was super enjoyable. Righteous Gemstones season 2, really, really, really good. Maybe better than season 1, as we're talking about shows that got better. And then, did you watch The Dropout?
No, because I watched the documentary.
Yeah.
I didn't want to watch the show, but I've heard great things.
Yeah, I mean, all I'll say about that, Amanda Seyfried's performance as Elizabeth Holmes was so good that Jennifer Lawrence canceled her movie about Elizabeth Holmes.
Wow.
Jennifer Lawrence was slated to play Elizabeth Holmes in a movie adaptation.
She was like,
of
I
this whole
can't
story.
top that.
Dropout came out, and she was like, nah, I'm good. Like, I'm not going to, why would I redo that?
Right.
Why would I redo that performance, essentially?
That is fucking wild.
And then there's one show that we have to at least mention here before we get any further. Did you watch The Rehearsal, Ross?
Yes.
I honestly, I don't know what to make of that. It's just it's not really on my honorable mentions. It's some people have all out said that this is an awful show that they fucking hated. It's also the number 1 on a lot of lists that I've seen.
Yeah.
And
very polarizing. Nathan Fielder.
Extremely polarizing. Nathan Fielder, I never watched Nathan For You, so I had no idea what to expect going in. It had some of the most interesting things I've seen on TV this year. I don't know if this guy is evil or a genius.
Yeah, I think a little bit of both.
But it was something. It was absolutely something. We're talking about novelty and originality.
Oh my
and
God, yeah.
And things that are spectacles and insane. And I did not find this one as enjoyable as I found something like Euphoria or Severance or The Bear.
But it was there.
But it was, I'll put it this way, it is something that I will think about.
Oh my God, man. I was unfamiliar with Nathan Fielder, and I watched The Rehearsal and was just sort of like, I'm the same as you. It's like it's not on my list or my honorable mention list, but it's also something I feel like has to be noted that it came out this year.
Yep.
And I ended up watching some episodes of the precursor to this.
Nathan For You.
Nathan For You, which was a little bit more up my alley in terms of like marketing and what he was doing with each episode. The Rehearsal is more like almost like a statement about society,
yes.
But I don't know what the statement is.
And
yeah, totally.
Yeah, yes, yeah. No, I've had to like read things to like try to figure out like what some of the things that he was going after.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say he is probably a comedic genius.
There is some commentary in there for sure.
Yeah,
but it is not always easy to tease out.
And it's dark and not fun to hear,
right?
Like or realize. Yeah, that's a great. Thank God you mentioned it. Yeah.
Like also. You have to watch the first episode alone. You're going to be like, unless you're super familiar with Nathan Fielder, you're going to watch the first episode and not know what you just watched.
Yeah.
What is this?
What just happened?
But I don't think I'm giving away anything. It's not really a spoiler to say that as part of this first rehearsal, Nathan Fielder somehow convinces HBO to build out an exact replica of a bar from Brooklyn, New York.
Piece by piece.
Like piece by piece.
Yeah.
Like full-on exact replica, down to like the rips,
but
in
real
the
life
holes
size, yeah,
in the bar seats,
right?
And it might be the most impressive thing that was on TV the whole year, like the single most impressive accomplishment from a crew,
yes,
or a set dressing, or
it's like art,
a show design. Like it's unbelievable that they did this.
I watched it with my niece, and
he moves the bar around the country.
I watched it with my niece, who's like a Nathan Fielder fan, so I was kind of able to get some context as this was happening. But the thing I kept saying, episode after episode, was like, how much money did HBO give him?
Yeah. Yes.
to produce this?
Great question.
Like,
It's a
did
really
this
great
cost the same amount as House of the
It might
fucking
have.
Dragon?
It might have been close.
Because he spent so much time and energy and money doing the most ridiculous shit you've ever fucking seen in your entire life.
Yeah.
And that alone makes it worth watching. Like,
yeah. No, you if you are a fan of TV, you need to watch this just to know that it's out there and to have if it's in my brain, it needs to be in your brain.
Yes, exactly. Too. That's exactly right. My honorable mentions are Our Flag Means Death, season 1.
Okay.
This was on
people
HBO.
have been asking us to watch this.
It's really fun, man. And if you like pirates, and you know, I'm a big pirate guy.
Yeah, everybody knows that about you.
This is focused on Stead Bonnet and his band of merry pirates, as it were.
Is Taika Waititi in the show, or is it just another Taika Waititi show?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, he has to put himself in everything he makes. Speaking of which, one of my biggest disappointments of this year was What We Do in the Shadows season 4, also Taika Waititi, and they just missed. I mean, I don't know how much of this show you've seen.
I watched the season.
Okay, the first 3 are some of my favorite comedy stuff in the last 10 years, and then Baby Colin Robinson ruined all of that. I mean, there were parts. Look, don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed episodes, but like in terms of being up there as like, this is everybody's got to watch this. It was completely a miss for me, and I've gotten through. I think I'm not even done yet. I'm through like 6 or 7 of them, and I'm just every episode. I'm like, oh, here we go again.
Have you watched the one with where they do like a whole episode that's basically like Property Brothers renovation?
I think so.
They've been making reference to these Property Brothers.
Oh, then no, I haven't yet. Not yet.
Throughout the season, and there's one that's like a full on like
I have not
bottle
seen that
episode property show.
Is it good or bad?
Bad.
Damn it. See, it's going to get... That's not great. Okay.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned this. We watched season 4. I thought it was good. I thought it was funny, but you're absolutely right that it is not... It does not achieve the same comic heights as the first 3 seasons.
It's not like the wittiness was gone.
And, well, I think one thing that the reason why I hadn't had as negative of a reaction as you're kind of making me feel right now.
Drawing it out of you.
You are drawing it out of me. The Baby Colin Robinson thing, like, I guess at least they kind of went for something.
Yeah, but it didn't work.
But it did. But you're right. It does not really work. And I'm looking forward to next season where he is just back as regular Colin Robinson, because he's kind of. I think what we kind of learned was that element of it, having his energy vampire dryness as like a counterbalance to like Laszlo and Nandor's kind of, you know, hysterics,
over the top wackiness.
Yeah, is kind of a necessary piece of the show.
I hadn't thought of it that way, and you're absolutely right. It's one of the reasons that like the elements aren't there. It feels like you're watching a season between seasons almost, where you're like waiting to get back to the actual fucking show. And yes, I appreciate that they took a big swing. It is a miss. This has not worked. I'm praying it hasn't jumped the shark, because it was one of my favorite things on TV, and I don't want it to be bad. But yeah, I'm ready for next season. Other honorable mentions: Peacemaker season 1. Haven't finished it yet. Really fucking enjoyed it so far. Righteous Gemstones season 2. You already said, but it's up there for me. The Boys season 4. Haven't finished it yet. Really fucking loved it so far.
I need to start that.
And then my only other TV disappointment that I watched from front to back was The Peripheral. I hate you guys who talked me into this. Why the fuck did you make me waste 10 hours of my fucking life watching this? I will never give Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy another minute of my time. I'm done with them. It was not good.
It's possible that they're not great at writing television shows.
I think we're at that
point.
They've
got great big ideas, and I think
this is that again.
Yeah, exactly.
The idea of it, the concept is phenomenal.
Well, and I think for a lot now. Did you ever check out The Expanse? I know that's another one of those types of shows that we get recommended a lot.
I haven't. No.
So I'm not commenting on The Expanse. I haven't seen it, but I know that The Peripheral was really recommended to us, and y'all obviously have like legions of Westworld fans as well.
Yeah.
Some people just like the concept of these shows, and that's really like, I think at the end of the day, that's all that matters to the fans, is that they are going super high concept and doing something super interesting that kind of works your brain and makes you think, and maybe has like a puzzle box element to it. But like, I think you and I, we like the storytelling. Something has to, like, we like some piece of narrative to latch onto, even if it's kind of all over the place like it is in Euphoria. Like, at least there are characters to grab onto, you know? And I've not watched The Peripheral either, but it does not shock me that it is that it's not living up to the hype.
I mean, even more than anything, the accents, man, they're just so bad. It's like I compare it to True Blood, But with True Blood, eventually you're just sort of able to overlook the accents because of all the high-speed vampire sex.
That's right, yeah.
And this doesn't have that, so you can't. And the accents never get better, and they're so fucking bad. There's like one good Southern accent in the entire season. It was a miss for me. I'm upset that I watched it. But yeah, Barrett and I are going to have to save our movies list for another pod. Maybe it's going to be shorter.
Let's run it down just one more time. You want to read back your top 10?
Yes. So my number 10 was The Gilded Age Season 1. Number 9 was 1899. Number 8, We Own This City. Number 7, Winning Time. Number 6, The Rings of Power Season 1. Number 5, The Offer. Number 4, The White Lotus Season 2. Number 3, Andor Season 1. Number 2.5, Euphoria Season 2. Number 2, House of the Dragon Season 1. And then number 1, Severance on Apple TV+.
10, I had Marvelous Mrs. Maisel Season 4. 9, House of the Dragon. 8, The Bear. 7, Barry Season 3. 6, Hacks Season 2. 5, Better Call Saul's final season/seasons. 4, Severance. 3, Euphoria Season 2. 2, Andor. And 1, White Lotus Season 2.
As we have said repeatedly, January 15th, The Last of Us premieres on HBO. Barrett and I will be covering it episode by episode in the same fashion we did The White Lotus and House of the Dragon, obviously, and Game of Thrones, famously. So, January 15th, get ready. It's going to be a lot of fun. The Last of Us premiere January 15th. I believe we will be doing our best to get our pod out January 16th on that Monday, which is, I believe, Martin Luther King Day, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. But yeah, every episode of our show, by the way, is available on YouTube, and we have a new YouTube-friendly studio setup coming in 2023. Our current studio setup was really for the sake of TikTok and Instagram Reels as far as the cameras go. We are going with a new YouTube-friendly configuration for the year of our Lord 2023, so you got that to look forward to, Clam Fam. Yeah, it's exciting stuff. BolenMedia.com to check out the company, BolenMedia.com/shop to get yourself some OCC merch, including that White Lotus Blossom Circle coffee mug or shirt. We've got great options, some House of the Dragon themed stuff as well. Follow us on social media, Oysters, Clams, and Cockles on TikTok, Clams and Cockles on Twitter, Oysters, Clams, Cockles on Instagram. Follow Mr. Barrett Dudley at Barrett Dudley on Twitter and Instagram. Follow me at WR Bolen. And I've got my Rings of Power recap and review episode coming soon. It's going to be one podcast. It'll take a full hour. Writing it has been sort of a nightmare because I can't remember any of the fucking character names beyond a couple of them. So be on the lookout for that. Also, Barrett and I are going to try to mix in an Andor episode soon just to digest and discuss what we loved so much about Season 1 and what we're expecting in Season 2. But now I think probably our movie podcast will take precedence over that, so we're just going to have to see how the schedule shakes out. But definitively, January 15th, The Last of Us, Season 1 begins on HBO Max, and we will be doing our full-blown, unofficial companion podcast thing with a recap and review of each episode as they come. Thank y'all so much for listening. We appreciate you. Go to patreon.com/oystersclamscockles for more. And until next time, Clam Fam, have a very happy New Year.